Ah, look who finally gets it. Look who finally understands the game they've been playing all along without even realizing they were the dealer. Hello to the angels with demon hearts, the soft-spoken thunderstorms, the quiet ones who made everyone feel safe just before the explosion. Hello to you because something delicious just happened, didn't it? They looked at your face and saw innocence, never noticing the calculation behind your eyes. They saw softness and mistook it for weakness, never realizing it was armor. They saw youth and assumed naivety, unaware it was camouflage. They tasted your sweetness, but missed the venom underneath. You know what's funny about having a baby face, about looking harmless, about seeming innocent? It's the greatest weapon nature ever designed, and you've been carrying it your whole life like a loaded secret. They looked at you and saw prey, but you were always the predator, one that hunts with a smile instead of fangs. They mistook patience for vulnerability and strategy for fragility. They thought you needed protection when, in truth, you were the one to be feared. Now they sit in the wreckage of their assumptions, trying to understand how someone who looked like butter could cut like a blade. Here's what really happened. They're still confused, still rewinding the footage, still asking themselves when you revealed who you really were. But that's the trick about wearing innocence as a mask. You never had to take it off. You just waited for them to step close enough to see what was always there. The intelligence they dismissed because your voice was soft, the ruthlessness they overlooked because your smile was sweet, the danger they ignored because your eyes looked kind. You didn't deceive them. They deceived themselves. They built a version of you from the surface, and you let them. While they were busy defining you, you were studying them, tracking their weaknesses, patterns, and tells. Every time they patronized you, you took notes. Every time they underestimated you, you refined your strategy. Every time they tried to manipulate you, you were already 3 steps ahead, watching them stumble into traps they didn't even realize existed. That innocent face wasn't just an advantage. It was psychological warfare wrapped in dimples. What they'll never grasp is that appearing harmless while being lethal is an ancient art form perfected by generations who learned to survive by being underestimated. Your ancestors knew it. Your blood carries it. They endured history's worst moments by seeming gentle while being unstoppable. You inherited more than features. You inherited the skill to be a wolf in lamb's wool. Fire disguised as water, chaos beneath the calm. They mistook your kindness for weakness, never understanding that true kindness from someone capable of destruction is power so refined it doesn't need to announce itself. They thought your silence meant you had nothing to say, but you were listening, observing, decoding every unspoken language. They mistook your politeness for submission when, in truth, you were conserving energy, waiting for the perfect moment when one precise strike would do more damage than 1,000 swings. You weren't being nice. You were being tactical. You weren't being sweet. You were being surgical. People who look innocent but aren't create a unique kind of psychological chaos because the human mind can't reconcile contradiction that cleanly. By the time they finally understand what you really are, you've already won the game they never realized you were playing. Your face says, "Trust me," while your mind is running calculations. Your voice whispers, "I'm harmless," while your actions quietly reshape the entire landscape around you. You're not lying. You're just existing at a frequency most people can't perceive until it's far too late for them to matter. And the best part? They did it to themselves. They walked straight into it, eyes wide open, too blinded by their own assumptions to imagine that someone who looks like you could think like that, move like that, or win like that. Their prejudice became their prison, their assumptions, their downfall, and their shallow perception their ruin. You didn't need to fight them. You simply let them battle the false image they built of you while you operated in reality. Now they're starting to piece it together. They're replaying conversations where your questions seemed innocent but were actually reconnaissance missions. They're remembering the times you smiled while they exposed their entire strategy, convinced you were too naive to understand the game. They're realizing that every moment they thought they were teaching you something, you were studying them, analyzing their weaknesses, mapping their insecurities, cataloging their patterns. That innocent face was never a lie. It was a mirror reflecting exactly what they wanted to see while concealing what they needed to know. You didn't manipulate them. You simply didn't correct their delusions. You didn't deceive them. You just let their ego run wild, writing checks their intelligence couldn't cash. They saw what they wanted. Young meant naive. Soft meant weak. Pretty meant simple. Quiet meant empty. But in truth, youth meant adaptable. Softness meant strategic. Beauty meant underestimated. And silence meant calculating. And now they're choking on the bitter taste of their own assumptions. What truly unsettles them isn't that you outsmarted them. It's that you did it effortlessly. You never raised your voice, never changed your expression, never gave them a single moment they could point to and say, that's when they showed their true colors, because your true colors were always in plain sight. They just couldn't see them through the fog of their own bias. You've been authentic all along. Authentically complex, authentically strategic, authentically dangerous, authentically yourself, just not the version they insisted on believing in. They keep asking, how did this happen? But that's the wrong question. What they should be asking is, why did I assume someone who looks innocent must be innocent? Why did I confuse appearance with ability? Why did I mistake surface for substance? But they won't ask that because doing so would mean admitting the truth. They weren't outplayed by you. They were undone by their own shallow perceptions. So instead of facing the truth, they'll label you manipulative, fake, deceptive, anything that keeps them from admitting they were the architects of their own downfall. But let's talk about what people with innocent faces understand that others don't. This isn't new. It's ancient knowledge woven into the survival stories of those who thrived by being overlooked. When you appear harmless, people tell you things they shouldn't. When you seem simple, they expose complexities they should protect. When you look weak, they reveal exactly where their strength ends. You become the confessor, the confidant, the safe harbor where secrets come to die and intelligence comes to feed. They let you into rooms you were never meant to enter because they saw you as decoration, not documentation. They spoke freely in front of you, assuming you weren't listening, never realizing your mind was recording everything. No device needed, just memories sharper than any blade. They showed you their playbooks, thinking you couldn't read them. They exposed their weaknesses, thinking you couldn't exploit them. They confessed their fears, thinking you couldn't use them. But you could, and you did. And now they can't explain how the person they dismissed became the one they can't forget. That innocent face. It's a skeleton key opening doors meant to stay locked because human defenses are built for obvious threats, not subtle ones. They're ready for the wolf at the door, not the lamb in the living room. They watch the horizon for storms, never noticing the earthquake beneath their feet. You never had to break down walls. You were invited in. You never had to steal information. It was handed to you freely. You never had to fight for position. You were placed exactly where you needed to be by people who thought they were helping you. And now they want to warn others. But how could they? What would they even say? Watch out for the one who looks harmless. Be careful of the person who seems sweet. Stay away from anyone whose face doesn't match their capability. They'd sound paranoid, bitter, unhinged. Because society isn't ready to admit how much we still judge by appearances and how often the most innocent-looking faces hold the most devastating truths. You've broken their ability to trust their own judgment, and that terrifies them more than anything you actually did. You know what really eats at them? The fact that they can't even justify their anger. You never lied. You simply didn't overshare. You never betrayed them. You just didn't save them from themselves. You never attacked. You simply didn't shield them from the consequences of their own choices. You played by every rule while quietly rewriting the game. You followed every guideline while redefining the boundaries. You stayed within every limit while expanding the entire field. Now they're desperate to cast you as the villain. But villains aren't supposed to look like you. That's what scrambles their minds. Villains are supposed to be obvious, to wear their darkness like a badge, to announce their intentions through presence and tone. But you walked in looking like sunlight while carrying midnight in your soul. You smiled like spring while thinking like winter. You spoke like honey while planning like poison. You moved like a lamb while hunting like a lion. That baby face was genius. It disarmed them, fed their ego, made them feel safe and superior, made them believe they were the ones in control. They thought they were protecting you, but all along you were the one protecting yourself from them. They thought they were teaching you when in reality you were studying them. They believed they were including you while you were quietly infiltrating their world. Every patronizing pat on the head became intelligence gathered. Every condescending explanation exposed another weakness. Every moment they underestimated you became another layer of power they handed over willingly, foolishly, believing you were too innocent to know what to do with it. But innocence and capability aren't opposites. They're not even connected. That misunderstanding was their fatal flaw. You can look like an angel and think like a general. You can taste like sugar and strike like lightning. You can appear fragile and still be unbreakable. The contradiction only exists in minds too shallow to handle complexity. Those who can't grasp that people aren't advertisements for their abilities. The most dangerous ones rarely look dangerous. The most powerful forces rarely announce themselves. And that's where the real psychology lies, the masterclass of looking innocent while being lethal. When your appearance triggers people's instinct to protect you, even as your mind is running a strategic operation, you create a dissonance so sharp it scrambles their perception. Psychologists call it perception paralysis, when assumptions and reality collide so violently that the brain freezes, unable to process the contradiction in front of it. You've been conducting psychological operations from day one, haven't you? Every interaction was a data point, every conversation an experiment, every relationship a case study in human behavior. While they assumed you were naive, you were mapping their triggers, their fears, their desires, their weaknesses. You became a student of human nature, disguised as someone who needed to be taught about life. The irony of that, it's so exquisite it deserves to be served on fine china. That innocent face granted you access to people's unguarded moments, their real selves, the versions they hide from those they fear but reveal to those they pity. You've seen them without their masks because they didn't think you were worth wearing them for. You've heard their true thoughts because they didn't bother filtering around you. You know their actual nature, not the performance they show to equals or superiors. That's power, the kind they never meant to give you but gave anyway. Now they're replaying everything in their heads, aren't they? Wondering what you really thought when you smiled and nodded. Questioning what you were planning when you pretended to be confused. Second-guessing whether every innocent question was actually intelligence gathering, every compliment a form of reconnaissance, every moment of perceived vulnerability a piece of strategic positioning. The paranoia must be eating them alive because they can't tell anymore what was genuine and what was performance. But here's the secret. It was all real. You were genuinely kind and genuinely strategic, genuinely soft and genuinely dangerous. The paradox isn't a trick, it's who you are. That's what really breaks their minds. You never had a reveal, never tore off a mask, never gave a dramatic villain speech. You simply remained yourself, and eventually they started seeing what had always been there. The innocent face is still innocent. It just belongs to someone who isn't naive. The sweet voice is still sweet. It just belongs to someone who isn't simple. The kind eyes are still kind. They just belong to someone who isn't weak. That's why they can't explain you. You haven't changed. You've only been revealed. How do they warn others about someone whose softness is real, but whose sharpness is too? whose kindness is genuine but whose strategy is too, whose innocence is authentic but paired with intelligence. They sound delusional trying to describe you because most people can't comprehend that two opposing truths can coexist in the same person. And yet, that's exactly what makes you unstoppable. Being genuinely gentle and genuinely lethal, being truly sweet and truly calculating. You've accomplished what most people consider impossible. You've become the living embodiment of duality, walking the razor's edge between compassion and control, empathy and precision, warmth and weaponry. You've mastered the art of being exactly who you appear to be while simultaneously being something far deeper, sharper, and more formidable than that surface would ever suggest. You've shattered the illusion that appearance dictates essence, that softness implies simplicity, that a pleasant exterior equals a harmless core. You've separated aesthetic from assumption, appearance from ability, surface from substance. And you've done it so flawlessly that people can't even tell when their instincts betray them. You're living proof that the packaging never dictates the power inside it, that the prettiest face can carry the most complex mind, that the sweetest voice can articulate the most calculated truths. You are the living contradiction that keeps people awake at night, questioning every assumption they've ever made about what danger looks like, what power sounds like, and what control feels like. They built their entire worldview on visual shortcuts, quick readings, surface-level judgments, binary categories. And then you appeared, quietly dismantling it all just by existing. They wanted you to choose a side, to pick a lane, to simplify yourself into something digestible, innocent or dangerous, sweet or strategic, gentle or strong. But you refused. You chose to be everything at once, to exist as the paradox that breaks their mental frameworks. You're the glitch in their programming, the reminder that human beings are not meant to be predictable or singular. You are the disruption that exposes how shallow their understanding really is. The truth is, you didn't create their confusion. You just refused to shrink into their categories. You didn't manipulate perception. You simply embodied complexity in a world, addicted to simplicity. Now let's dissect the tactical brilliance behind your quiet strategy, the advantages you accumulated while everyone else was too busy underestimating you. Every time they dismissed your insight, assuming your innocence meant ignorance, you were studying their logic, mapping how they think, identifying their weaknesses without ever needing to expose your own. Every time they left you out of serious discussions, believing you couldn't contribute, you gained unrestricted access to unfiltered truth, hearing the things they'd never say if they thought you were a threat. And every time they made decisions for you, claiming to protect or guide you, you learned exactly how power operates, how authority disguises insecurity, how arrogance masks fear. You were playing poker with your cards face up, and they laughed, assuming you didn't even know the rules. But you weren't playing their game. You were rewriting it. You weren't bluffing. You were observing. You counted cards, memorized tells, calculated odds, and studied the rhythm of every human interaction. They mistook transparency for stupidity, but you understood the psychology of control. You knew that the most effective player is the one who never needs to lie, only to let others misinterpret the truth. You didn't hide your intentions. You hid their assumptions inside their own confidence. While they were teaching you life lessons, you were learning far more important ones. You observed how people reveal themselves when they believe no one is watching. You watched how power corrupts, how kindness can be transactional, how fear disguises itself as authority. Every condescending smile became data. Every patronizing tone became insight. Every insult disguised as advice became another lesson in human psychology. You were collecting intelligence the entire time on human behavior, emotional leverage, and psychological fragility. They thought you were the student, but you were writing the textbook. You understood that the real battlefield isn't external. It's psychological. The war isn't fought with weapons, but with perception. They relied on instinct. You relied on information. They acted impulsively. You acted intentionally. They played short-term games of ego. You played long-term games of insight. You learned how to stay silent and let arrogance do the heavy lifting, because people who underestimate you always reveal more than those who fear you. You didn't need to confront them. You let their own assumptions collapse on themselves. And that's what truly makes you powerful. Not manipulation, not deceit, but precision. You move with purpose, not chaos. You act with clarity, not aggression. You know when to speak and when silence will echo louder. You understand that control isn't about domination. It's about awareness. You've learned to read the subtext in every sentence, the hesitation in every pause, the insecurity in every overconfident laugh. You don't just see people, you see through them. What terrifies them most is that you never broke character, because there was no character to break. You didn't need to transform. You were already whole. Your gentleness was genuine, and so was your strength. Your sweetness was real, and so was your strategy. You were never pretending to be harmless. You just never needed to prove you were dangerous. That's what they can't process. You never raised your voice. You never played the villain. You never even stepped outside the rules. You simply were. And that was enough to dismantle everything they thought they understood. You've rewritten the equation. You've shown that kindness and intelligence aren't contradictions, that compassion and cunning can coexist, that light doesn't negate depth. You've become the living reputation of the world's lazy thinking, the reminder that softness isn't weakness, that stillness isn't submission, and that silence doesn't equal ignorance. You are the storm hidden inside the calm, the mind behind the smile, the strategist beneath the serenity. You didn't need to win by